In just 43 seconds, Jasmine Crockett unleashed a truth hidden beneath $3.2 billion of Trump family wealth. The air trembled as she raised the name Tiffany, and the room fell silent as if history itself held its breath. But imagine this. What if one daughter's name could topple an empire built on golden secrets? What if a single folder held the power to expose not just a family rift, but a blueprint for how power discards its own? Trump tried to bury her in lawsuits, but it was too late. What was in those pages that forced a former president to erase his own kin and the woman bold enough to call it out? Hold on tight, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a mirror reflecting the hidden fractures in America's most infamous dynasty, where loyalty is currency and silence is the ultimate price. Dive deeper and you'll see how one courageous act can ripple through society, challenging us all to question the cost of staying quiet in the face of injustice. The red light on the C-SPAN camera flickered once, then locked into a cold, unyielding stare. Room 241 of the Capitol Oversight Chamber was quiet yet alive, like a courtroom, seconds before a verdict. Picture the scene: velvet curtains, framing windows untouched by breeze, but quivering with unspoken tension, the seal of the United States hovering over the dais, like a deity awaiting defiance. Could this be the moment where one voice shatters the illusion of unbreakable power? The air felt thick with anticipation, every breath in the room synchronized, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to witness what might become a pivotal turning point in political history. At the center sat Donald J. Trump, flanked by two sharply dressed attorneys, his hands clasped as if nothing could reach him anymore. His voice, when it came, was steady practice, laced with faint humility. He looked straight at the camera and said, "All my children are equal in my eyes. Always have been, always will be." He smiled as if delivering the final line of a campaign ad, his expression crafted to convey unbreakable family bonds, yet hiding the cracks that were about to be exposed. She sat 3 rows back, spine rigid, the only committee member not shuffling papers or murmuring to aides. On her lap rested a thin, weathered envelope, corners creased, as if it had survived a fire to reach her. Her fingers tapped once, as if to confirm, yes, it's still real. The silence lingered half a second too long, building an electric charge that made the audience shift uncomfortably. Then Chairman Graves leaned into his mic. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. We now recognize Congresswoman Crockett for her time." Jasmine rose with the ease of someone who had already scripted the ending. Her heels clicked twice on the marble floor. Sharp, deliberate, surgical. Cameras pivoted. Trump adjusted his tie. "I value your testimony, Mr. President." Jasmine began, her tone neither warm nor hostile, just precise. "And your claim that all your children are treated equally in your estate's framework." Trump's smile widened. "I said what I said." She nodded. "Excellent, because I'd like to submit into the record a document this committee received from a confidential but verified source." And that's when the bomb dropped. What if these 3 pages could unravel decades of carefully crafted image, revealing the cold calculations behind a father's love and forcing us to confront how far some will go to protect their brand? She reached down, opened the father's love envelope, and pulled out exactly 3 pages, printed, signed, corner stapled, bearing a faint watermark reading TTO Holdings, Revision, Draft 622. She held up the first page without glancing at it. Her eyes were fixed on Trump's. "This," she said, "is a 2022 amendment to the Trump Trust redistributing assets worth over $3.2 billion. Trump's face didn't move, but one of his attorneys shifted slightly in his seat, a subtle sign that the ground was beginning to shake beneath them. Jasmine continued, steady as a surgeon's blade. "It details new allocations for Donald Trump, Jr., Ivanka Trump, Eric Trump, and Barron Trump, each receiving shares between 20 and 25%. She paused, letting the words sink in like a slow-building wave. "But nowhere, not a single line in this revision mentions Tiffany Trump. No percentage, no footnote, just an empty space where a daughter's name once stood." The room went still, deathly still. Even the fluorescent hum above seemed to quiet, as if the electricity itself was stunned into silence, the collective gasp of the audience hanging unspoken in the air. Trump let out a breath, a sharp, audible tesk. He leaned toward the mic. "That document was stolen, forged, obtained illegally. This is slander, and I won't stand for it." But Jasmine didn't flinch. "Mr. President," she cut in, voice sharp as a razor, "I never said it came from outside. The original was sent through internal Trump.org legal servers. and the signature at the bottom. She lifted the second page closer to the camera. Red ink swirled across the lower corner in unmistakable script. DJ Trump. Somewhere in the back, a camera clicked. A pen fell. A man in the gallery exhaled as if remembering how to breathe. Jasmine paused, eyes narrowing not with anger, but with certainty. I have just one question, Mr. President. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. If all your children are equal, why did you erase one? Imagine the ripple effect. If this question alone could force a reckoning, what other secrets might tumble out next? Exposing the vulnerabilities of those who seem invincible. The moment Jasmine Crockett spoke Tiffany Trump's name and let it hang in the air like smoke, the entire chamber seemed to lose gravity. What if this single utterance could echo through halls of power, challenging the very foundation of a legacy built on exclusion and inspiring others to break their own silences? No one moved. Not the press, not the aides, not even Trump. For one full second, he was frozen. Hands gripped tight on the table, lips pressed into a line so sharp it could slice glass. Then he did what he always did when cornered. He roared. That document is fake. He growled, voice louder now, mic crackling. Altered, illegal. You have no right to bring that garbage in here. His lawyer reached out gently, almost like calming a wild beast. But it was too late. The atmosphere had shifted, the tension now palpable, as whispers began to circulate among the spectators. Jasmine didn't look afraid. She looked like she'd been waiting for this exact moment, like a chess master who let him move his king into checkmate on purpose. Fake, she said, raising the second page a bit higher. Because I'm pleased to confirm this was pulled from internal Trump org servers, time-stamped and unedited. The metadata is intact. The signatures match. You can send it to your team, but I already have. A wave rippled through the room. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer mouthed the word damn. Trump leaned forward, fists on the table. My people didn't authorize anything. This is a coordinated attack, typical radical Democrat slander. But Jasmine stood unmoved. The only coordination here is between the truth and the proof. She laid the final page flat on the committee table, a scanned email chain between Trump's estate lawyer and an unnamed account labeled DJ10 inbox ttu.net. The last reply in the thread read, simply proceed with the revision. Remove her name. Soft liability. D. And that's when the room shattered, not with sound, but with energy, like a stone dropped into a still lake, every unspoken doubt rippling outward. Reporters began scribbling furiously, their pens scratching like frantic heartbeats. A few leaned back to check their audio was clear. Phones buzzed in staffers' pockets. The story had left the room and gone national. But what if this revelation was only the beginning, sparking a chain of exposures that could redefine family power and truth in the public eye, encouraging more insiders to come forward with their own tales of hidden betrayals? Jasmine stood still watching him. Trump, though, had turned to his lawyers, whispering fast and sharp, like a man trying to plug a dam with his hands. Chairman Graves cleared his throat. Mr. Trump, would you like to respond to the evidence entered into the record? But Trump didn't. He just stared at the table as if it had betrayed him too. The silence that followed wasn't random. It was heavy, intentional, and Jasmine let it linger like a courtroom pause before a confession, allowing the weight of the moment to press down on everyone present. She leaned into her mic, voice softer now, but somehow more dangerous. This isn't about percentages. It's about presence, about who gets counted and who gets crossed out with a pen. Her eyes locked on his. You said they were all equal, but your own ink tells a different tale. She looked up at the cameras, calm but cold as steel. So tell us, Mr. Trump, what did Tiffany do to become disposable? Pause for a second. What if this question isn't just about one family, but a wake-up call for every overlooked voice in society, demanding to be heard and prompting a nationwide dialogue on the true meaning of equality? His name was Richard Wilkes. Blink and you'd miss him. But what if this unassuming lawyer held the key to unlocking a vault of secrets that could change everything we thought we knew about loyalty and legacy, revealing the human cost behind the facade of invincibility? No headlines, no scandals, no television spots, just a man in tailored charcoal suits who spent 23 years as the lock on Trump's legal vault, the one who kept blood off the documents and dirt off the gold. They called him the Iron Pen behind closed doors, because once he drafted something, it never leaked, never cracked, never breathed. He was loyalty in human form, until one phone call in 2021. It came late past 9:30 p.m., Mar-a-Lago time. Wilkes was already in bed reading case briefs on a dimmed blue screen. When the private line rang, he knew who it was. Trump didn't call for chit-chat. The voice on the other end was familiar but sharper, colder than usual. "We need to rework the trust," Trump said. No pleasantries, no humor, just steel his tone, leaving no room for negotiation or doubt. Richard sat up. "Which part?" Trump's reply was low and fast, like a man racing a lie detector. "Cut Tiffany out. Give her something symbolic. You know, polite a gesture." Richard paused. "She's your daughter." Silence on the other end. "Then she's a weak brand. Polls poorly. She dated a Democrat. This isn't personal. It's preservation." Those words shook Richard in a way few things ever had. He'd written off bankruptcies, backroom deals, even hush orders for mistresses. But this was carving blood from legacy, like a budget cut, a decision that felt profoundly wrong on a human level. He hesitated. Trump caught it. "Got a problem with that?" He asked, voice laced with menace. Richard exhaled through his nose. Not from fear, but calculation. He had a mortgage, a son in college, a non-disclosure clause that would shred his life if he pushed back. "No problem," he said. "I'll send a draft revision by Friday." And he did. 12 pages, precise, emotionless as always. Tiffany Trump's name erased from all major estate rights, leaving only a single line in fine print, one-time goodwill allocation. $50,000. It was done fast, clean, silent, just as Trump liked. But something in Richard never settled back down. For the first time, the vault inside him, the one that never opened, began to creak. He started rereading old files at night, making private copies, locking them in his own safe under the name R. Whitmore. Not to leak, just in case, because deep down he knew something was coming louder than a press release, heavier than a subpoena. And when it hit, someone would knock not about taxes or golf course zoning, but about the daughter Trump erased like a typo. And when that day came, Richard wasn't sure who he'd protect anymore, because even vaults, when cracked just right, start to whisper. What if his quiet rebellion was the spark that ignited a firestorm of accountability, encouraging others in similar positions to question their roles in perpetuating injustice? It arrived on a Wednesday morning, unmarked, hand-delivered, slipped under her office door before dawn. No return address, no name, just a heavy envelope with Jasmine Crockett's name scrawled in bold black ink like a dare. She didn't open it right away. She stared at it long and hard, as if it might start ticking. Jasmine had seen enough DC tricks to know truth rarely arrived politely. It either burst through the front door or crept under it like this. When she finally broke the seal, the scent of cold paper and toner hit first. Then she saw what was inside. 3 items stacked like a confession. First, a full-color copy of the Trump Trust revision, Tiffany's name nowhere to be found. Faint redactions lingered under the reprint like ghosts someone forgot to erase. Second, 3 legal billing slips dated and signed, showing fees for asset exclusion changes and courier services to Mar-a-Lago. Third, what stopped her breath for half a second, a printed memo, not typed. A scanned note scrawled in hurried, slanted handwriting. At the top, the Trump Organization logo. At the bottom, 2 words underlined in red. No legacy for liabilities. She read it once, then again, then a third time slower. Her fingers tightened, not from anger, but focused like a pianist about to strike a note that would break the room. She didn't speak, didn't call anyone, didn't pace. She just sat, the envelope open beside her, as if it had cracked something that couldn't be closed again. Most would have rushed to leak it, post it, or shout it from a press podium. Jasmine didn't. She knew what this was. Not just paper. A loaded weapon in a velvet case. 3 weeks. That's how long she held it. Not from fear, but strategy. She verified it meticulously, cross-checking every detail to ensure no loopholes. Check the ink, the metadata, the courier signatures. Match the handwriting. Quietly, precisely, she didn't even tell her staff. And when she was certain, when every piece clicked like a lock turning, she placed the envelope in a private safe beneath her father's war medal and her mother's last handwritten recipe. Not because it was fragile, but because it mattered. This wasn't just a betrayal of a daughter. It was a blueprint, a glimpse into how power deletes what no longer serves it. And Jasmine Crockett, no matter how calm she seemed, had made her choice. She wasn't just going to read this note. She was going to make the whole damn country hear it. But what if this envelope was the tipping point the catalyst that turned personal pain into public revolution, mobilizing countless others to share their own stories of erasure. The truth clicked into place the moment Jasmine laid all 3 pages side by side like puzzle pieces someone tried to hide under wallpaper. The trust exclusion, the billing slips, the handwritten note that hit like a slap. No legacy for liabilities. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about the brand. And in Trump's world, brand wasn't a business tactic. It was blood type. You didn't earn your place by being born. You earned it by being useful, camera-ready, message-safe. Jasmine clicked her pen once, then again, as faces played in her mind like a reel. Ivanka, polished, picture-perfect, always posed for a press shot. Don Jr., loud, loyal, towing the line like a hunting dog off its leash. Eric, clumsy but obedient. Even Barron, though young, paraded with calculated timing. But Tiffany, she was the one you barely saw. And when you did, it was fleeting. Forced smiles, appearances, more duty than desire moments that felt staged rather than genuine. Jasmine opened a private browser tab and typed "Trump speaks about Tiffany" into the search bar. The results were nearly empty. A few polite mentions, a soundbite here, a quip there, once calling her very smart, very nice, but never strategic, never powerful, never essential. Nothing like how he spoke of Ivanka with an odd mix of pride and possession. This wasn't favoritism. It was casting. And Tiffany had been written out of the script. Outside her office in the hallway, a young aide stood frozen, staring at the papers on Jasmine's desk. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, almost under his breath, "This isn't about money, is it?" Jasmine didn't look up. "Number." The aide voiced what she already knew. "It's about humiliation. Because what kind of father doesn't just cut his daughter from the will, but cuts her from the story, leaving her as a shadow in her own family's narrative?" She thought of her own childhood for a moment, her mother's loud laugh, the scent of her father's coat after a long shift. They had no wealth, but they saw her every day, every struggle, every win. Tiffany had palaces, but no place. That was the cruelty here. Not just that Trump erased her from a financial document, but that he made her invisible in a family that worshipped visibility. Jasmine tapped the note again, eyes narrowing. She understood now. This wasn't an inheritance story. It was a mirror showing America what happens when power values image over connection, obedience over blood. A story not rare, just rarely told, one that resonated with so many who had felt the sting of being deemed unworthy. She slid the file back into the envelope, whispering to herself, "No legacy for liabilities, huh? Then let's talk about what you call an asset." As her office lights dimmed into evening, Jasmine gazed out at the Capitol dome, her reflection fading into the glass. Can you love someone and still erase them from history? What if this quiet reflection was the calm before a storm that would redefine justice for the unseen, empowering generations to reclaim their narratives? Michael Cohen didn't answer the first call. Or the second. On the third, Jasmine left a message. She didn't plead. She didn't threaten. Her words landed like a scalpel, clean, cold, controlled. "Mr. Cohen, I believe you sent something to my office. I'm not asking for a speech. I'm asking if you're done covering for a man who erased his own daughter." 4 hours and 17 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered before the first ring ended. His voice was gravel soaked in whiskey. Low, wary, not hostile, just used to betrayal. "You want answers? Come alone. No cameras, no team, no tricks, no damn press release." They met the next evening at a Bronx diner. Not the polished kind. This one had flickering lights, sticky menus, and a waitress who'd seen enough secrets to keep one more. Jasmine wore no makeup, no blazer, no pin, just denim leather and silence. Cohen was already in the back booth, slouched like a man who'd seen too much and slept too little. He looked older, grayer, like time had dragged its heels on his soul. He didn't shake her hand. He just nodded. "You know what this is," he began. "I wrote every damn word. I drafted the exclusion clause. I marked the trust revision. I wrote the script the lawyer read to make it all sound clean." He sipped lukewarm coffee, then continued. "Trump gave me the orders while watching cable news. He said Tiffany was too quiet, too private. Not the kind of daughter who wins elections or sells books. His words, not mine." He leaned in. It wasn't a will. It was a branding decision. The sentence hung like a storm cloud. Jasmine didn't speak. Her silence said it all. He pulled a USB drive from his jacket's inner pocket, dented warm from being clutched too long. Internal documents, legal notes, and a voice recording. You'll know it's him the moment you hear it. He laughs when he says it. He slid the drive across the table. Jasmine didn't reach for it right away. She studied him instead. Why now? His answer came fast. No hesitation. Because I spent a decade cleaning his lies, and I let him turn me into a weapon. But the damage, the real damage, it never stays with him. It spreads. It lands on people like her, people like Tiffany. He stood without finishing his coffee, slipped on a coat that didn't quite fit anymore, and left without looking back. Jasmine sat there staring at the drive. She hadn't expected him to sound broken, but maybe that was the cost of loyalty. Once it cracks, it never fits right again. Outside, the wind picked up, and inside her coat was something heavier than evidence. It was proof that silence wasn't just complicity, it was strategy, and Jasmine Crockett had just flipped the script. But what if this clandestine meeting was the turning point where former allies become the harbingers of downfall, setting off a chain reaction of confessions from within the inner circles of power? The letter was one page, but it struck like a gavel slamming down on the truth. Cohen handed it to Jasmine in silence, sliding it across her desk like a weapon he was finally done carrying. The paper was thick, firm, official. Jasmine turned it carefully, as if it might crumble if she moved too fast. The Trump Organization letterhead was embossed at the top in faint gold ink, elegant and sterile, but the words below were anything but. She read them once, then again, her jaw tightening by the third line. To Richard Wilkes, proceed with trust amendment as discussed. Remove Tiffany. She's soft, not on brand. PR liability. $50K cap. Optics matter. D. That was it. No apology, no hesitation. Just a daughter reduced to a headline risk and a 5-figure payout. Jasmine didn't speak for a moment. She just stared at the final line. Trump's initials scrawled in red pen at the bottom. Not a signature, a dismissal. The kind that didn't ask questions. It demanded silence and screamed louder than any courtroom testimony could. Jasmine held the letter to the light. She saw where the pen had dug into the paper like a blade. No edits, no second thoughts, just a decision made and executed with the cold certainty of firing a maid. She leaned back, fingers pressed together, the paper still in her lap. Behind her, the blinds were closed, but the hallway buzzed. Her team didn't know yet. She hadn't told them, not until it was airtight. She reached for her legal pad and began drafting. Witness statement, House Oversight Committee, subject asset manipulation and pattern of inheritance bias. Submitted by Representative Jasmine Crockett. Every word she wrote cut deeper, not because of what she said, but because of how obvious it was. Now the exclusion wasn't financial. It was personal, strategic, a surgical erasure, disguised as estate planning. This wasn't about Tiffany being forgotten. It was about her being deliberately erased. And worse, it was about why too soft, not marketable, a PR liability. Those weren't a father's words. Those were a CEO's cutting a division that underperformed in focus groups. Jasmine took a breath, the kind you take before saying something you can't unsay. She opened her laptop, attached a scanned copy of the letter, and scheduled the evidence submission to the committee clerk's secure inbox. It would go through first thing in the morning. No leaks, no press, just the truth handed to the process clean and loaded. But before she hit send, she looked at the letter one last time. That red D at the bottom wasn't ink. It was a fingerprint. Proof that this wasn't just a man playing favorites. It was a man who turned family into a brand and love into leverage. And Jasmine Crockett was about to make the world hear every word of it. What if this simple act of drafting could ignite a movement transforming one woman's fight into a call for universal justice, inspiring activists and ordinary people alike to demand transparency from those in power? When Michael Cohen stepped into the hearing chamber, the room was already taut as a wire. C-SPAN cameras were live. Reporters leaned in like hunters tracking breath. And in the back, Donald Trump sat behind his counsel table, arms crossed, wearing that familiar smirk, the one he used when he thought the world still belonged to him. Cohen didn't play to the cameras. He looked straight ahead, face pale but steady, hands folded like a man walking into his own reckoning. For a moment, the room was so quiet you could hear a pen drop. Then, without clearing his throat or asking permission, he began. I was Mr. Trump's personal attorney for a decade. I protected him. I lied for him. And I kept secrets that hurt people who didn't deserve it. He opened the folder before him and lifted a single page. The letter Jasmine had revealed, the one with the red D at the bottom. This letter was dictated to me word for word by Donald J. Trump. It wasn't written with love. It was written with calculation. Because in his world, family isn't sacred. It's strategic. Trump chuckled under his breath loud enough for the mic to catch. One of his lawyers tried to nudge him quiet, but he brushed it off. Her gaze didn't waver, not from fear, but from precision, like a surgeon waiting for a pulse to falter. He called Tiffany soft Cohen, continued voice, even but colder now. He said she wasn't marketable, dated the wrong people, didn't perform well with donors, posed a liability to the brand. His words, not mine. Gasps spread like static through the gallery. Some reporters scribbled, others just stared. Even the panel members, most of them seasoned, hardened, looked stunned. Cohen laid the paper flat. His hands trembled for a second, then stopped. I did what I was told because I thought silence was loyalty, but silence is how rot spreads. I betrayed truth once. I won't do it again. A pause, long, uncomfortable, devastating. Chairman Graves leaned forward. Mr. Cohen, do you confirm this letter was delivered to Trump Organization legal counsel with his direct authorization? Cohen nodded. I do, and I still remember the smirk on his face when he signed it, like cutting someone out of his life was just another Tuesday. Trump shifted in his seat but didn't speak. He couldn't, not with that much evidence tightening around him like a noose. Jasmine turned slightly, just enough to lock eyes with the room, not the man. She didn't need to speak. Her silence said it all. Outside headlines moved faster than the verdict. Cohen confirms Trump erased daughter, red pen, black heart. And then came the flood, phone calls, emails, survivor stories from across the country. Women and men written out by those meant to protect them. But the loudest reaction wasn't anger. It was awakening. Because if those who once buried the truth were now unearthing it, what else might still lie hidden beneath the surface? What if those who hid the truth decide to expose it? Could this testimony be the domino that topples an entire era of unchecked power, leading to broader investigations into similar cases of familial and political betrayal? She arrived without fanfare, without an entourage, without wanting to be seen. The black SUV pulled into a side entrance behind the Capitol windows so dark it looked like a hearse for secrets. For a moment it sat idle. Then the rear door cracked open just enough for one heel to touch the ground. The woman who stepped out wore black from head to toe blazer blouse hair, tied tight, no jewelry, no press smile. Tiffany Trump moved like someone who'd learned to vanish in plain sight. No security flanked her. No reporters rushed forward. The press corps had their lenses trained elsewhere on Jasmine, on Cohen, on Trump himself, still fuming behind lawyers in denial. They didn't see the most crucial witness slip through the staff door. With a stillness that shifted the air, her presence alone, carrying the weight of years of quiet endurance. Jasmine saw her. Even from the far end of the hallway, she felt the gravity change. A soft knock came at her private door. A staffer leaned in, pale, whispering, "She's here." She came alone. Jasmine didn't blink. She just nodded, then whispered back almost to herself. She said she'd come, but only if we made it safe. This wasn't theater. There'd be no podium, no cameras in her face. Tiffany hadn't come for drama. She'd come for dignity, and Jasmine knew better than to break that. As Tiffany passed through the hall, her steps were nearly silent. The few who recognized her froze. No one spoke her name, but every gaze followed her like a shadow stepping out of a painting. One aide whispered, "Is that?" Jasmine answered without turning. Yes, that's the one he forgot to count. There was something haunting in how Tiffany carried herself, upright, but not proud, present, but not claiming space. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was something heavier, like a lifetime waiting for a seat at a table already cleared. She entered the witness prep room alone. Jasmine followed, closing the door softly behind her. No handshakes, no speeches, just silence thick and electric. Tiffany reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. Creased corners softened. She placed it on the table. "He gave me this on my 18th birthday," she said quietly. Said it was a symbolic gesture. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note that said, "Use this wisely." That's all. Jasmine sat across from her, steady. She didn't ask why Tiffany kept the envelope all these years. She already knew. Because some wounds don't bleed. They fade into the paper, into the handwriting, into the weight of being tolerated but never chosen. Outside, the hallway buzzed again. Journalists still hadn't noticed. Not yet. But the room was tilting. And Jasmine knew when the right moment came, this silence would crack louder than any press conference. The girl Trump erased was now in the building, and she wasn't here to be seen. She was here to be heard. What if her arrival signaled the end of invisibility for the forgotten, turning one woman's courage into a beacon, for millions illuminating paths for those long in the shadows? The hearing room was ice cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the silence, sharp, expectant, ready to snap. Cohen had just stepped down. The cameras were still warm. Jasmine sat quiet, eyes forward, hands folded like a final prayer. She knew what was coming. Trump didn't. He leaned into his mic, suddenly voice, breaking the stillness like glass under pressure. She'd never betray her family. It wasn't a statement. It was a plea laced with panic and denial. His tone was uneven, like he'd lost the rhythm of his own arrogance. Tiffany would never sit with people like you. She knows her roots. Her eyes skipped past Trump as if he wasn't there, landing squarely on the chairman, where power still held weight. "Mr. Graves," she said, "I'd like to call our final witness." A hush swept the chamber like a shadow passing. Chairs creaked. Journalists leaned forward, hands twitching toward record buttons. The double doors to the side of the panel opened without a sound. And there she was, Tiffany Trump. She stepped into the light with no expression, no fanfare, no hesitation. Her black suit was cut sharp, severe, almost like armor. Hair pinned back, no jewelry, no smile. The only thing she wore was control. She didn't walk. She moved like someone rehearsed, not in performance but in restraint, as if every step was a battle she'd already won before crossing the threshold. For years, she'd been the daughter in the background, left out of campaign ads, headlines, strategy meetings. But today she wasn't a footnote, she was the climax. Every eye in the chamber followed her, some in disbelief, others in silent awe. Even the journalists hungry for scandal paused long enough to feel the weight of what they saw, their notebooks, poised as if sensing history in the making. Trump, for once, didn't speak. His mouth opened, but no words came. His knuckles whitened against the oak table. Tiffany reached the witness seat and sat. Jasmine offered nothing. No nod, no comfort, just space. The moment was Tiffany's now. Chairman Graves leaned into his mic. "Miss Trump, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" She didn't blink. "I do." She adjusted the mic. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. "I wasn't invited here today. I wasn't even supposed to be part of this story. But that's the point, isn't it?" The room held its breath. For years, I was the quiet one. I stayed out of politics, out of headlines, out of the way, and for that I was called a liability. Trump exhaled through his nose, visibly fuming but still silent. Tiffany continued. "I didn't come here to settle scores. I came because someone finally asked me something my father never did." She looked straight at Jasmine. "They asked how I felt." And then she turned back to the committee. "So I'll answer. I felt erased." Jasmine closed her eyes for just a second, not from exhaustion, but reverence. Because at last Tiffany Trump had spoken, and no one in the room would ever forget what silence once sounded like. For a moment, no one moved. Tiffany Trump's voice still echoed in the air, quiet but thunderous in its clarity. She sat upright, hands folded, not trembling, not seeking pity. She'd come with a truth sharpened by years of silence. And now she was cutting through everything with it. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The cameras were already zooming in, hunting every twitch in Trump's jaw, every flicker of emotion on his frozen face. But he didn't flinch. He sat like a statue under siege, trying to outlast the storm with stone. Tiffany took a breath. Just one. Then she said it. "This isn't about money. It's about being erased." And I was. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words hit the room like a switchblade, slicing through a velvet curtain. Swift, elegant, final. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Not physically, but in energy. Every shuffle, every whisper, every soft tap of keys from reporters stopped. Some held their breath. Others blinked, stunned by the simplicity. Because in one sentence, Tiffany hadn't just exposed the truth. She'd made it undeniable. Across the room, Trump exhaled hard, as if trying to blow the words back into her mouth. He opened his hands slowly, as if debating whether to slam it on the table or cling to what little control remained. But Tiffany didn't look at him, not once. She looked at the panel, at Jasmine, at the cameras. "I'm not angry," she said, voice lower now, but deeper. "I'm not bitter. I'm just done pretending it didn't happen." One senator leaned forward. Another rubbed his chin. The audience behind the press glass didn't move. "My father built an empire on loyalty," she continued. "But loyalty only worked one way. You served him, or you vanished. Jasmine's hands rested lightly on her desk's edge, but inside she felt the weight of Tiffany's words ripple through the room like cracks under polished floors. "I didn't come to reclaim my name," Tiffany said. "I came so no one else loses theirs in silence." That was the moment. The one that would play 1,000 times on news segments, TikTok's radio shows. It would be quoted in op-eds printed on protest signs. Not because it was shocking, but because it was true and finally spoken aloud. In the back of the chamber, someone whispered, "That's it. That's the legacy breaker." Trump stood suddenly knocking over a water glass. His lawyers reached for him, but he waved them off, storming toward the exit cameras, tracking every unsteady step. Tiffany didn't turn to watch him leave. She just sat there, finally present in the space she'd been written out of for years. And somewhere across America, people watching from living rooms asked themselves the same quiet, terrifying question. Would you speak up if it meant burning the last bridge to your own father? What if her words weren't just personal, but a universal cry that could empower the silenced everywhere, fostering a culture where vulnerability becomes strength? It took less than 24 hours. The clip of Tiffany's testimony was still climbing past 30 million views when the news broke Donald J. Trump had filed a federal lawsuit against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The filing hit the wire like a smoke bomb packed with legal fireworks and personal venom. 3 accusations, 1 goal: defamation, theft of private family records, emotional sabotage. He didn't just want to discredit her, he wanted to destroy her. The language in the suit was sharp, theatrical, almost unhinged. He accused her of weaponizing personal family documents for political gain, plotting to humiliate him in a coordinated public ambush. The lawsuit demanded $125 million in damages, plus a formal retraction, a public apology, and a complete withdrawal of the evidence from congressional records. She stood like a pillar carved from resolve, unshaken, unmoved. She read the filing on her phone outside a D.C. coffee shop coat, half-buttoned, earbuds still in. One of her aides froze, expecting fury or panic when they saw her face. But Jasmine just exhaled slowly, like someone watching a wave she'd already braced for. She looked up, met the lens of a CNN crew across the street, and spoke words that ignited the second explosion. "You sued me because I wouldn't stay silent." The video was 15 seconds long. No edits, no filter, just Jasmine Crockett. Eyes, steady voice, firm, standing in the cold with a lawsuit in one hand and the truth in the other. Within an hour, it was everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, TikTok, Reddit, Facebook, feeds in nursing homes and college dorms. The clip became more than a soundbite. It became a question. Why does a man with billions bodyguards and global networks fear a congresswoman with a folder? Could this defiance inspire a wave of resistance against intimidation tactics nationwide, empowering everyday citizens to stand against similar threats? The internet had answers. So did the public. Commentators on both sides called it what it was: a panic move, a desperate swing from a man who knew the narrative had slipped from his grasp. He could control the airwaves, the lawsuits, the money, but not her voice. Not anymore. Jasmine returned to her office, reporters waiting on the steps. She didn't hold a press conference. She walked past head high as one shouted, "Will you respond in court?" Her reply didn't slow her stride. "If truth is the charge, I plead guilty." Inside, her staff gathered, holding copies of the lawsuit, reading through lines of legal drama, masked as argument. Jasmine stood over them, not pacing, not raising her voice. She simply said, "This isn't law. It's intimidation dressed in a tie." And with that, she handed the lawsuit to her legal team and walked into her strategy meeting. Outside, the world was picking sides. Because Trump hadn't just declared war on Jasmine Crockett. He declared war on the woman who refused to sit down. And now the nation wanted to know who'd blink first. What if this legal battle became the symbol of resilience against bullying from the powerful, setting a precedent for future confrontations? The lawsuit didn't just land, it detonated. Within hours, the story exploded across every major network, echoing from primetime to social media timelines like a siren. Fox News pounced first, branding Jasmine a predatory radical, accusing her of orchestrating a political smear under the guise of justice. Pundits called her ambitious, calculating, dangerous. One host smirked into the camera and asked who weaponizes someone's daughter for a headline. The soundbites spread like wildfire through right-wing media. They painted Jasmine as a fame-hungry congresswoman chasing viral glory, not truth. They played her 15-second clip on loop, twisting her words into arrogance. One segment ran a side-by-side of Jasmine and Tiffany, with the caption "manipulated or malicious." The message was clear. Jasmine wasn't protecting Tiffany. She was using her. But the backlash sparked something louder. Civil rights groups, advocacy coalitions, and women's organizations across the country surged into the conversation. They didn't just defend Jasmine. They rallied behind her like a movement reborn. The NAACP issued a statement within 12 hours. Congresswoman Crockett did what others refused. She defended a silenced woman in full view of power. Feminist leaders called it a turning point for accountability. Social media erupted with hashtags like "Stand with Jasmine," and she spoke for her. And through it all, Tiffany stayed silent. No interviews, no press releases, not a single tweet. But she didn't deny anything. Not the letter, not the testimony, not the courtroom truth that her own father had turned her into a liability on paper. That silence spoke louder than any denial. It made the country lean in waiting, wondering, because in a world built on narratives, her refusal to defend her father was its own statement. It wasn't just what she said in the chamber. It was what she chose not to say after. What if this collective roar signaled the birth of a new era, where women's voices drown out the noise of division, creating lasting change in policy and culture? Inside Jasmine's office, the windows hummed from passing helicopters. Her staff worked round the clock, fielding calls from networks, lawyers, and organizers offering support. She stood in the center watching the chaos unfold, not with fear, but with calculation. This wasn't just her story now. It had become a national fault line. She gave no interviews. She issued no denials. Instead, she met with her legal team, signed a formal response to the lawsuit, and walked out into the hallway head high. A reporter shouted, "Congresswoman, are you afraid of what this could do to your career?" She turned, not stopping, and said just loud enough for every mic to catch, "I'm more afraid of what happens if we stay quiet." The doors closed behind her, and the storm outside kept growing. Because in America, when one woman speaks the truth, you hear an echo. But when two women refuse to be erased, the whole country listens. Imagine if this echo grew into a symphony of change, reshaping society one bold stand at a time and fostering a more equitable future for all. 3 days after Trump's lawsuit, Jasmine struck back. Not on cable news, not on Twitter, but in court. She filed a formal motion to dismiss backed by a 48-page legal memorandum citing constitutional protections, whistleblower precedent, and most crucially, public interest defense. Her legal team called it airtight, but Jasmine's signature at the bottom gave it more than legal weight, it gave it purpose. The filing didn't just challenge the lawsuit's merit, it tore it apart line by line. Every claim of defamation was countered with documented fact. Every accusation of theft was met with a verified source. And at the heart of it all was the truth Tiffany had testified under oath, that Jasmine's words were real and the records were never stolen, only buried. When the press caught wind of the motion, coverage shifted again. What started as a scandal morphed into a constitutional showdown. Now pundits ask questions they'd once ignored. What counts as public accountability? Where does privacy end and legacy begin? And if a president can erase his child from paper, what else is fair game? What if this motion wasn't just defense, but a declaration of war on systemic injustice, paving the way for legal reforms that protect whistleblowers? The courtroom preview drew lines around the block. Before the hearing even began, people stood in the rain with signs. Some backed Trump, others held photos of Jasmine and Tiffany side by side. One woman wore a shirt reading "Silence isn't loyalty." Another held a poster with a red DJT initial scratched through with the words "Truth lives longer." Inside, Jasmine sat at the defense table in a navy suit, no frills. Her hair was pulled back, face unreadable. Across from her, Trump sat still but seething, jaw clenched, like it was all that kept him from shouting. The judge allowed no theatrics, but when Jasmine rose to deliver her brief oral statement, the room shifted. She spoke without raising her voice, but every syllable landed with precision. "This isn't about a trust fund," she began. "This is about trust between power and the public. When a man who built his brand on image cuts his daughter out of the picture and then sues the one who shows the frame, that's not privacy. That's a pattern." She looked straight at the bench. "This isn't a family matter. It's a pattern." Trump shook his head, whispering to his attorney, who whispered back but didn't move. The judge nodded once and took the filings under review. No ruling came that day, but the air had changed. Outside, the courthouse reporters swarmed Jasmine's team. Microphones stretched toward her questions, firing like bullets. She paused for one breath, then gave them only what they needed. If telling the truth makes me dangerous, then maybe it's time we ask who made truth dangerous in the first place. She turned and walked away before they could ask more. And across the country, the question rippled far beyond the courtroom. How do you fight a system that treats truth like treason? Could this courtroom clash become the blueprint for future battles against the elite, empowering ordinary individuals to challenge authority? The hearing room was packed again, but this time the tension felt different. It wasn't scandal that drew them back. It was something heavier, unfinished business, a national reckoning too big for one name. The House Oversight Committee had reopened the session under a new title, Ethics and Family Governance. And at the center stood Jasmine Crockett, no longer just a voice in the storm, but the storm itself. She entered the chamber with a single file in her hands, thinner than before, but somehow heavier. Inside were letters, not legal documents, not press statements, but handwritten confessions from women never invited to speak. Daughters of governors, CEOs, lobbyists, media titans. Some were cut from inheritances, others from family photos. One letter read, "He used to call me his little girl," until I stopped agreeing with his policies. Jasmine placed the file on the table, paused, and looked over the panel. "Before you call this isolated," she said, "calmly ask yourselves how many Tiffany's are out there." The room fell quiet again, just like before. Even the skeptics on the committee leaned forward. She read 3 letters aloud. The first from a Texas woman, daughter of a former senator, who cut her from his will after she testified for assault survivors. The second from a New York staffer, an undocumented daughter of a political donor, acknowledged privately but never publicly. The third from a Georgia woman who said he called me too emotional to be an heir. I guess tears don't look good in campaign ads. Jasmine's voice didn't break. It sharpened. This isn't about money. It's about erasure. It's about power choosing silence over connection, control over family image over truth. Behind her, the screen displayed the phrase, "How many Tiffany's are out there?" It wasn't a slogan. It was a wound turned into a mirror. One congressman tried to object, muttering about irrelevant personal drama, but Jasmine cut in before the gavel fell. If a man's leadership is built on public image, then how he treats his own blood isn't personal. It's political. She sat down slowly, the file still open beside her. And for the first time in the chamber's history, no one had a follow-up question. The hearing moved on, but the center of gravity had shifted. Jasmine hadn't just reopened a case. She'd reopened a national memory one too many had tried to forget. And as the cameras pulled back, capturing the full weight of what had happened, the country was left asking one thing. How many daughters have been left out simply because they didn't fit the brand? What if this question opened floodgates, revealing stories that could heal a divided nation and fostering empathy across political lines? It began as a whisper, one unnamed source, one late-night email, one quote too precise to ignore. By morning, the Wall Street Journal had the headline plastered across its homepage, "Exclude, Tiffany shift optics, avoid donor confusion." The leaked memo came from deep within Trump Organization's internal archives, dated just months before the trust revision. It wasn't speculation, it was strategy. The memo was cold, clinical, stripped of humanity. Tiffany's name was reduced to a bullet point under a branding analysis. It didn't mention feelings, relationships, or family. Just numbers, just perception, just the sentence, reassess her inclusion. Demographics don't align with core donor expectations. News networks exploded instantly. The memo hit harder than any testimony because it confirmed what Jasmine had been saying all along. This wasn't about estate planning. It was about optics, about cutting a daughter, not because she failed her father, but because she didn't fit the package he was selling. Melania Trump, when reached for comment, gave just 2 words, "No comment." And somehow that silence roared louder than 1,000 denials. Inside the Trump camp, chaos spiraled. Former aides dodged the press. PR teams scrambled to reframe the leak as unauthorized internal analysis. Surrogates flooded airwaves, calling it a distraction, a misinterpretation, a political ambush. But the damage was done. This wasn't just a personal issue anymore. It was a brand fracture. For decades, Trump had sold the myth of golden family unity, polished children, unwavering loyalty, a dynasty built not just on wealth but on presentation. And now that image was crumbling under the weight of one buried memo and one daughter's voice. She didn't smile. Victory wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. The truth was doing what the courtroom couldn't, stripping power of its polish. When reporters swarmed her on the Capitol steps that evening asking for a reaction, she stopped just long enough to say the facts are speaking. I'm just listening with the rest of you. And then she walked away, leaving a silence no press statement could clean up. Online, the public took over. Memes flooded social media. One showed the Trump family at a gold-draped table, Tiffany photoshopped as a ghost at the end. Another featured the memo with the caption, "Some daughters are born inconvenient." But beneath the humor, something deeper stirred a question. If image matters more than integrity, how many more truths have we bought dressed in suits and sound bites? Inside Trump, tower lights burned late into the night. Lawyers drafted responses. Advisors debated whether to spin or stay silent, but the foundation had shifted because this time the leak didn't just expose a memo. It exposed the machinery behind the man. And across America, one thing became painfully clear. The Trump brand hadn't cracked. It had finally started to bleed. What if this bleed spread, exposing vulnerabilities in other powerful figures and sparking widespread reform, leading to greater transparency in how leaders handle personal and public affairs? The chamber was packed, not just with Congress members or staffers, but with the weight of everything that came before. The leaked memo, Tiffany's words, the lawsuit, the silence, the smear, every thread now converged on one podium. Jasmine Crockett stood behind it, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with a calm that made the room lean in. Cameras locked on. America held its breath. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words carried like thunder wrapped in velvet. "We talk so often about the fathers of this nation," she said. "But what about the daughters they left behind? The ones they refused to name? The ones they erased with pen strokes and silence?" Some members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others froze, eyes fixed on her, as if something deeper had just cracked. The phrase hung in the air, "daughters they left behind," and it echoed beyond the chamber's walls. Behind Jasmine, the screen showed a simple image. Tiffany's testimony paused at the moment. She said, "I felt erased." Below it, a single line, "How do you measure legacy if you exclude who you created?" Trump sat near the back, not at a table this time, but in a row for witnesses. His face was stone. His arms folded so tightly it seemed he was holding himself together by force. But the corner of his mouth twitched, the weight building, and everyone felt it. Jasmine continued, eyes steady. "This isn't about inheritance. It's about accountability, about what kind of nation we become when power treats people like branding heirs, when daughters are dismissed because they don't sell well to donors." A few in the crowd stood slowly, then more. By the time Jasmine reached her final line, half the chamber was on its feet, not clapping, not cheering, just standing. A silent verdict. And that's when it happened. Trump stood mid-speech. No announcement, no excuse. He shoved his chair back its legs, screeching against the marble floor. Eyes turned, phones rose. He didn't look at Jasmine. He didn't look at anyone. He walked out like a man leaving a funeral he refused to admit was his own. Jasmine didn't pause. She simply closed her binder, took one last look around the room, and said, "If this chamber can see every dollar on a balance sheet, then it can see the people written off it." Then she stepped back, her shadow long under the ceiling lights. Outside, millions watched live. Not just politicians, not just pundits, but families, daughters, fathers, people who'd never seen themselves reflected in these halls until now. And as the screen faded to black, the question lingered across dinner tables, living rooms, and quiet corners of the internet. Can a broken family mirror a broken nation? What if this dramatic exit marked the beginning of the end for untouchable legacies, signaling a shift toward greater empathy and leadership? No press conference, no apology, no legal spin. The lawsuit against Jasmine Crockett was dropped just after midnight, tucked between headlines, buried under noise, as if silence could unwrite what had been spoken. No statement from Trump, just a brief filing marked voluntary withdrawal with prejudice, quiet, final, cowardly. Jasmine received the news in her office alone. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just nodded as if she'd seen it coming days ago, because she had. She knew the storm, once exposed to air, could no longer be contained in courtrooms or controlled by fear. What followed wasn't relief. It was something heavier. The mailroom flooded, first with emails, then letters, then handwritten envelopes from cities she'd never visited. Some came on lined paper, others on legal pads, a few scrawled on stationery or napkins, but they all said the same thing. "Thank you. You told my story without knowing it." They came from estranged daughters cut from wills, sons dismissed for being too quiet, too emotional, too different. Women who'd changed their last names to escape their father's shadows. Men who'd never been allowed to cry until they saw Tiffany say she was erased. Each letter became a weight Jasmine carried not as a burden, but as proof. Proof that this wasn't about politics. It was about memory, about legacy, about the invisible ledger, where people track love, withheld, and acknowledgement denied. Tiffany, meanwhile, vanished. No interviews, no podcasts, no statements. Her name fell from the trending lists. Her image faded from the news cycle, but her silence didn't feel like retreat. It felt like release, like someone closing the door on a chapter she never asked to be part of. And Jasmine respected that. She didn't call her, didn't push. She knew what it meant to speak when no one asked you to. But she also knew what it meant to stop talking when your words had done enough. The headlines moved on. Another scandal, another storm. But inside Jasmine's office, a cardboard box remained sealed, filled with every letter, every message, every confession from the past 3 weeks. She labeled it in black marker legacy rewritten. When an aide asked what to do with it, she simply said, "Keep it close, we're not done." Because for every person who stepped forward, 10 more were still hiding. And Jasmine Crockett, whether the world liked it or not, had become the voice they never thought they'd hear. Outside Washington buzzed as always. But in quiet corners in homes and nursing stations on buses, and in break rooms across the country, something had shifted. The nation had watched a daughter speak. Now it was listening to the echoes. What if these echoes grew into a chorus, forever altering how we view family power and the courage to speak up, and creating a legacy of inclusion that outlasts any empire? The sky outside hung heavy like it hadn't exhaled in hours. But inside the historic auditorium at Howard University Law School, the air pulsed. No music played, no press banners lined the walls, just quiet, deliberate breath, the kind of reverence reserved for funerals or awakenings. Jasmine Crockett stepped to the podium like someone walking into a verdict she'd already accepted. She wore no political badge, no campaign polish, just a charcoal gray blazer, and beneath it, a pin engraved with one word: matter. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She let the room feel the weight first, because some truths shouldn't arrive with a grin. Justice doesn't start in court, Jasmine said, her voice landing like a gavel strike, low and absolute. It starts when we decide silence is no longer sacred, when we look someone in the eye and say, "You're not invisible." Not anymore. The crowd didn't cheer. They froze. People asked me why I risked everything, she continued, why I challenged a legacy backed by billions, why I stood up to a man whose name is etched in gold when I barely had time to sleep between hearings. She paused. They thought I was fighting for attention. But I was fighting for the girls who exist only in footnotes, for the sons buried in image for every child, not camera-ready enough to be called family. A professor lowered her head. A student covered her mouth with both hands. The auditorium was a pressure chamber, and Jasmine held the match. This isn't about money, it's about patterns. It's about how power decides who counts and who disappears. And I'm tired, she said, voice trembling now, of watching good people disappear just because they weren't convenient. A voice from the back whispered, "Say that again." Jasmine heard it but didn't stop. "They say I embarrassed a family," she said, "but I didn't. I exposed how they embarrassed the truth. And if we can't protect truth in private, we sure as hell can't pretend to govern it in public." Applause rose like thunder in a canyon. But she didn't smile. She didn't bask in the praise. Her eyes stayed fixed on the young women in the front row, the ones never told they were enough without proving it. She ended without flourish. "One day you'll be told to stay quiet to keep your seat. Just remember, no seat is worth your silence." And with that, she stepped down. But the echo stood tall. The world didn't end in fire or fury. It ended in a whisper, shared, stitched, streamed millions of times over. Jasmine's words echoed across screens, cracked and pristine in lecture halls and laundromats, on morning shows and midnight podcasts. She hadn't just exposed a secret. She'd shattered the illusion of power wrapped in family portraits and campaign slogans, and the country couldn't look away. A viral clip showed Tiffany leaving the courtroom. No designer handbag, no team, no smirk, just a woman shedding the weight of a last name that never shielded her. News anchors stumbled over terms, estranged, unacknowledged, strategically sidelined. But one headline from a student-run paper in Georgia said it best: she was never the brand. It wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a reckoning. Then came the cascade. Teens on TikTok reenacted Jasmine's courtroom takedown like a script from a civil rights film. Grandmothers commented on Facebook, "My husband did this to our daughter too. She watches Jasmine now." Civil rights historians drew lines from the erased daughters of plantation owners to today's polished dynasties. The line wasn't thin. It was a wound, and Jasmine had reopened it not to harm but to heal. A video compilation swept the nation. Jasmine standing in Congress. Jasmine speaking at Howard. Jasmine walking through rain without an umbrella, refusing to run. The audio track behind it, her voice calm, defiant. "If silence is loyalty, then I chose betrayal. And I'd do it again." The phrase became more than a statement. It became a rallying cry, stitched on protest shirts, carved into signs murmured like gospel in courtrooms where women had long whispered instead of shouted. Jasmine didn't ask to be a symbol, but symbols are rarely volunteers. That week, the lawsuit was dropped. No apology, no press conference, just a vanishing act. Trump's camp claimed it was a distraction from real issues, but everyone knew the truth had already been televised. And in the final frame, Jasmine stood atop the Capitol steps at twilight, not in power, not in protest, but in presence. She looked not at the camera, but through it, as if seeing the generations still waiting to be named, to be counted, to be remembered. Sometimes, she said, the truth doesn't burn bridges. It lights the path back to ourselves. Fade to black. And then one final prompt etched across the silence. What legacy would you rewrite if given the chance? Sometimes loyalty isn't silence. It's daring to break the silence so no one is erased from the memory of those who matter. Because truth, no matter how small, deserves its place in the light. If something lies buried in your family, your community, your heart, isn't it time to speak? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes telling the story is where healing begins. If this story made you pause, don't scroll past. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where silenced voices finally speak. Tap the bell, because the next truth uncovered might not just shake a legacy, it might speak to your own. Which moment stayed with you? Which silence felt familiar? Leave a comment. Don't just watch history unfold. Be part of the voice that rewrites it. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It's not meant to defame or mislead, but to spark reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. Truth doesn't vanish. It waits in the quiet for someone brave enough to bring it back.